Yeah.
So today we're going to be covering today's latest in game industry news topics. What do we have on the docket, Eric?
Oh, we got four little
Nuggets.
nuggets. Yep. We've got news about the Sony. Well, sort of. Speaking of reading tea leaves, the Sony PSVR2 might have been delayed. We don't know. We'll talk about that. Activision is has made some moves, presumably in advancement of more ongoing unionization talks. Also related to Activision is some interesting stuff that has happened in the harassment lawsuits that California. I think it's the suit is called something like California versus Activision Blizzard.
Yeah.
And there's been some drama there behind the scenes a little bit about the council and the government involvement. We'll cover that, and then an update about game development insider stuff. Sony and Lego have both dumped huge gobs of money into Epic, the creators of the Unreal Engine, which powers many of everyone's favorite games. So, and we'll talk about what that is, why they may have done it, and what it means for Epic and the future of the engine.
Yep. And some people's favorite topics in general. So yeah, we'll cover all of that. I'm going to slightly adjust my camera. There we go. That was weird. It's like bumped once, overcorrected, and then the second one was dead on. Yeah, so let's cover those things. I don't know which one we want to do first. I guess we'll just go on the list in order of script.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about this one, or do you want me to jump into it?
Why don't you jump on it? We'll
Yeah,
start with that one.
this one's close in the territory of rumor mill.
Yeah.
There's some valid information that's there, but the rest of it is speculation. But the whole thing is this is concerning the PSVR 2 and a suggested delay to the release date into 2023. There's not been a release date for PSVR 2. I'll state that much. There's just been a bunch of things that Sony's been doing that I can talk about as well. But the crux of this whole thing is everybody has believed that the PSVR 2 is coming this year because of some things that Sony's been doing. A CEO of a supply chain consultant group named Ross Young had tweeted out a retweet of a report that pointed to VR displays shipments being increased this year by 50% over last year. These are good signs, especially if you are in the market for buying a new headset. What they're talking about specifically here are shipments of the raw component of VR displays being shipped to manufacturers to be manufactured and put into a product. And those are up this year. So that means manufacturing is likely to be ramping up as the production facilities at whoever's producing VR displays is collecting materials to do a manufacturing run. What's unclear is exactly when these numbers are up by. Was it up at the beginning of the year? Are they up, projected out? But either way, the statement is that they're up by 50% this year so far. And that suggests that Sony, or more than Sony, are producing another headset, and that's why you see an increase in output. But in the same breath, it's in the same tweet, really. The person who's making these statements, Ross Young, also states that this is despite Sony and Apple pushing out the launch of their hardware into 2023. So they're kind of contradictory statements. VR display manufacturing's up this year and likely going into component manufacturing and then going into actual hardware manufacturing for this year. But the devices that you'd expect these to be in are being pushed into 2023, so says Ross Young. We don't know what this guy's inside information is, if he's got any whatsoever, or if he's just plainly speculating. But the immediate follow-up was, hey, that means that Sony's VR solution is going to be coming in 2023, not 2022 like we expected. You have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, part of to jump off of your thing about we don't know what information he may or may not have, or what tea leaves specifically he was reading.
Right.
Sony has announced the specs of their displays. So it's possible as a supply chain consultant that, he's seeing bill of materials and orders going through for displays, and is able to connect the dots and match, specs for some display maker says it's this many pixels by this many pixels with this refresh rate. Like, those are the hard specs. We're not telling you who the delivery is. It's just, here is our stuff, and we are back ordered on this because we don't have stock anymore. It just got bought. But that may be in the supply chain sort of what this person is looking at to suss out the fact that this is PSVR2 specific. It could also be, as far as we know, Apple has not announced anything, and yet there is still claim in here that Apple's assumed AR solution is also part of this.
Yeah, and I think this might be addressing specifically like high-end VR display components, which you would likely find in a consumer product from Apple or consumer product from Sony. We know Sony is using a high-end display. They're using a high-density OLED for their solution, and at a fairly high resolution. These are displays that really only get produced for this. There's a couple other applications that are outside of AR, VR, but generally speaking, I think the largest production outside of cameras, like photo cameras, or video cameras for that matter. Yeah, but both of those would use high density. To backtrack here, modern video cameras and film cameras have gone away with single lens reflex, which is using a mirror to project light into the viewfinder, so you're actually seeing what the sensor would see when it snaps. Now most cameras have live displays where light goes directly into the sensor reproduces video and puts it into your eye, so the need is very high density OLED solutions that show you a representative image of what the sensor's seeing, and that's become popular with video cameras and DSLRs, high end video equipment. So that it could be explained for that, but it's likely not at the size that they're looking at right now. The size that AR VR use are generally larger than what you see on video camera and video equipment. So he's probably spot on with the increase that we're seeing are actually for AR VR. It's just unclear exactly what it's going into as of right now.
Right. Which products are, that's where the tea leaves reading comes in, and looking at what companies may or may not be sort of gearing up for a release of a product.
Yeah.
I mean, timeline wise, it sort of makes sense for Sony. We don't know what other components there are involved here. If Sony's looking and saying there are other aspects of this that are in our supply chain that are still, causing us to need to kick it out until 2023. I mean, this is one person and one aspect of the supply chain, so we really don't know.
Yeah, I will say this though, in my experience manufacturing, the manufacturers themselves, at the point in which they make it, sure, you can account for when they make it, but as soon as they're shipped to a factory to be manufactured, they don't sit for very long. So what usually happens is within less than a month, you have the gathering of components, unless something weird happens. You'll have gathering components at a manufacturing facility or multiple manufacturing facilities, and then manufacturing will happen within a month of those components being collected, manufactured out at that point, and once you have a fully manufactured thing, it won't sit in a warehouse at the manufacturer for much longer than a month either. So and generally logistically, they could be sending them to a logistics company that can warehouse them for a period of time, but Sony in the right mind is not going to be paying for millions of units to be sitting in a logistics warehouse, waiting for them to hit like an amount of units before they start getting them on boats and moving them to whatever the regions they're going to be in. So if you have stuff that's hitting manufacturers, it's not it's not strange to think that the products that they're building at this point in time are either going to be prototype runs before they do a full manufacturing run, or you're doing a manufacturing run with a release, within a window of 3 months of when they're manufacturing.
Yeah, the one thing I would throw in there is that when it comes to these types of situations with the tech supply chain right now, the one wrench I would throw into the discussion that you just threw out is, in an ideal world, when we can rely upon orders arriving and being fulfilled, you're absolutely right. However, there are people out there right now that, due to supply chain, back orders of taking years for components. I was speaking to somebody who just announced a product that they've been building for a while that does cheaper CT scans for hardware developers.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking to them sort of about the supply chain stuff, they were talking about how they literally are, these are just employees and workers at the companies who sort of are annoyed at the industry right now, because they'll look at their BOM, right? Their build order materials, or whatever that stands for.
Yeah.
Bill of materials, yeah. And they'll say, okay, well, we're going to need 1,000 of these things coming up. But like, oh my God, there's a shortage for those. We're going to buy 5,000 and then sit on those for a while and have them just in case we need them.
But they don't they don't necessarily sit on them. Like in the case of...
That's what the thing, real quick. That's what they were saying that they had been doing, is they literally just sit in the warehouse and aren't used until they find that they need them.
They may be doing that, but they may be for very specific things. Like what you do is you'll buy reams of whatever capacitors or very specific odd materials. But in the case of like OLED production, what will happen is Samsung or whoever's manufacturing it, Sony even, will be going, we're ordering 1 million of these, but like Samsung's going, we'll be taking our orders for this period of time. We're going to start doing a manufacturing run of this at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Of that manufacturing run, this is how much is allocated to Sony. Here's how much is allocated to Apple. And here's when you can be expecting delivery of these things. But most of those things are set up so that you're not sitting on 5 million OLED panel or OLED components sitting in some warehouse in a humid Chinese warehouse somewhere, right?
Well,
and on top of that, paying for the manufacture or the warehousing costs on top of that, because you start eating into your profit margins by just storing components, especially high-end components, at that rate. So I think what's more likely happening in the case of something like this, where Sony would be ordering a run of whatever 2 million, 3 million, 5 million OLEDs for this, it's being an order that's placed ahead for a manufacturing run that's going to happen at some point in time. Mm-hmm. Samsung can claim, hey, our orders are up 50% year over year, and then they'll be manufactured and shot out to Sony at some future point in time.
Right. But so my point here is that Sony is perhaps, like, let's say that we're Sony, mm-hmm. and we know that the PSVR2 is going to require X number of displays. We're going to want to start building them in Q4 2022. We also know that if we're hitting that X number, we're going to need certain number of chips, which we're dying to get our hands on. They're very hard to come by, because all the manufacturing, the plants, is all sort of back ordered and they're running 24/7 at max capacity already anyway. They're looking at it and saying, like, we have no idea if Apple is going to come in and buy out all the allotment going forward, if Apple is, or our competitors come in and say, we're going to do something big, right? Facebook announces the Quest 3. then what happens to all of those the nice LED things that Sony may or may not have had the capacity from Samsung to buy? If they know we are going to have all of this at the same spec, and we're going to try to build 5 million, we'll start with 1 million as our first shipment to consumers. We want 5 million of them. We're going to build 5 million of them. I agree with you about the storing 5 million OLEDs in boxes or whatever, at a warehouse,
like they're going to
is
be
expensive.
On the reams, yeah.
But at the same token, as Sony looking at what's been happening with the PS5, where they cannot build them fast enough for, what is it, 2 years now, a year and a half we're into this, like they might be looking at this and saying, let's build up a do we know the numbers? Did the article cover the numbers of OLEDs that have been ordered, or was it just that they were seeing?
No, they're seeing
trends?
year over year 50% increase this year over.
Right.
So it's like 150% of what it is they're producing last year.
Right. So without knowing the specific numbers, it's hard to say if is it like 250,000 or a million or whatever. But...
I mean, yeah, it's hard to say. I would just say in the case of like certain components, what you're suggesting is true. In the case of these bespoke components for large orders, I think what you're seeing is Sony going, we're buying from Samsung this bulk of an order from this manufacturing run, and Samsung saying, okay, well, we have to increase our manufacturing by X amount in order to hit the targets that were being requested by from the large manufacturers. Sony and Apple aren't the types of companies that have to really wait. They just may preemptively buy or order more than they need. It's small companies that are like, that are ordering 500,000 of something, and the manufacturers that are creating the components for it are going like, we're not giving you any special consideration here. You get to buy whatever's left over if you can manage to get your order in on time.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, my understanding from these friends that I spoke with was that the companies themselves are treating a lot of the components for the hardware that they build like we humans do toilet paper in crisis mode. Like oh my gosh.
And there's certain things they know are only going to be like, there's certain things that certain manufacturers have been like, we're not increasing the capacity because once this demand goes down, we're going to end up having like another factory that is going to be idle, and having an idle factory is bad news for them. Right. Sustained growth of an industry is what merits someone saying, okay, well, we'll open up another plant for OLED manufacturing for whatever these reasons. But it's like early on, especially during the pandemic, you had a lot of Chinese manufacturers of components saying, like, I know this is in high demand, and the demand is outstripping the supply. But this is because everybody's in quarantine, and now there's a draw on, computer monitors. And if we increase manufacturing capacity, this doesn't help us at all, because now we're going to be dedicating another line to doing this, but the demand's going to go down as soon as people start leaving home. Whether or not this was well predicted by any of these manufacturers, knowing that the pandemic-like situation was going to last more than 2 years, might have been short-sightedness, but. These are the conditions that we're in. Manufacturing aside, the other thing that's worth noting is whether or not Sony will actually hit a 2022 deadline for for releasing the PSVR2. I think most people are suggesting that there will be some sort of launch for the holiday. Because it's a window that they want to hit, at least for the US and North American markets. And there's been a lead up this year, first announcing the controller. Yeah, it's just the controllers and like the specs of the controllers. Then later, before GDC, they had done, like a month before GDC, they had done a full spec reveal of the PSVR 2. Then you had it being rolled out at GDC to developers who hadn't already gotten dev kits, which I think is a pretty clear indication that we'll probably see like an October full reveal and lineup of whatever games they have available for it. We also know Sony's been taking a chunk of their available money to get talent for VR development, and they've been showing it to specific developers that are probably looking for like a 2-year outlook on having a game on PSVR2. You could take that as them trying to release it in 2 years, but I think there's probably a legitimate reason to suggest that the PSVR2 will be hitting a release date of this year. And given Sony's manufacturing capabilities, they'd have to do something incredibly wrong to miss their target window for whatever reason it is. I think the only thing that would cause them to miss a target window is not having content available for the PSVR2. Like, why would you have hardware available if there's no software for it?
I mean, it could be the other way around. If some component that they expect is delivered is not, right? You can't.
Yeah, but like
hardware
Sony doesn't go into manufacturing run not knowing those things are not together before they go ahead and sort of do that. So if they target a date, it's because they have things well established, a year ahead of time. The only thing is, like, if something they're testing and prototyping doesn't perform the way they need to, and they have to source a new component, that could throw a huge wrench in, and that's something that they would be able to predict. But if everything's going to plan, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to hit their...
It could be that they just don't hit the numbers that they wanted or expected. You know, does it make sense if they only make 50,000 of them in the first run because some component was constrained that they expected to get the final delivery?
Yeah, I was saying that Sony went 2 years in developing the PSVR 2, and at this point, being at the point which they're manufacturing to some degree, not know where they're at. So like a delay would not come from a component, and it's a delay would come from a planned delay that would happen, or something that's totally out of like left field.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, because I'm pretty sure that the final hardware, my understanding of the final hardware for PS5, for instance, they only started manufacturing it, like putting it together and putting the boxes
it's like
together
2 months before it's on shelves.
Yeah, exactly. It was a month or two before. It wasn't a long lead time. They weren't built, like, they're not building
but
PSVR2 now.
Long before that, they're procuring the components, the raw components that go into the actual manufacturing.
And if they're not procuring them and putting them into warehouses, they're getting guarantees.
But procurement isn't getting them to warehouse. Procurement is getting an agreement from a manufacturer that they'll be able to supply things, but at a certain
right. And that right there is the exact weak link that I was just trying to refer to. That if their suppliers are, oh shit, we screwed this up and we don't have the capacity that we did, or there was a manufacturing defect, or like someone else swooped in and took our, but here's all your money back and some other bad clause, but whatever, you know, who knows that there is a way that they could be sort of screwed in that way. My guess is that right now they're trying to put in the bids earlier than normal to make sure that
no, I mean, like, right now bids are right
priority
on time, right? Like, they would be at the beginning of this year working on procurement for the manufacturing that they'd be doing. The fact that they have headsets available at GDC means that they have enough components procured to do their prototyping runs and get stuff into developers' hands, which we know is happening. So if they're at the point in which the stuff that they're going after is not a stable purchase for manufacturing run, in like 2-3 months, then something critical has gone wrong, and it's not likely supply-based constraint issues, because they would have known supply-based issues well ahead of time. Especially them doing prototyping runs now.
I mean,
it would have to be like a component that falls out of spec for some reason. Or in the case of like a brand new component that someone's manufacturing on the spot is having high yield failure.
Right. I mean, that's sort of what, maybe they pushed it too hard and tried to they oversold their actual capacity, right? Some supplier that Sony works with. Who knows? This is massive speculation and just sort of saying what if reasons that this could be a
my general statement is that for companies like Sony, who's ramping up for a manufacturing run, you wouldn't be caught 3 months beforehand going, well, we're not going to be able to hit our dates. Like, that usually doesn't happen for any reason. For a company like Sony, who does this sort of manufacturing all the time, it happens if there's like a brand new component that's that's like a high yield failure, but not because like we don't have any of the components left. You weren't able to get your order in on time. Like that's not.
Oh no, yeah, no. They're talking with their
They get preference, and they get because of how many they're going to be asked to produce.
yeah.
And they would have been going through procurement a while ago, and we know that they're going through procurement because they have prototypes. You can't get a prototype without some sort of procurement and some sort of deals working in place with the people who are going to be doing your component manufacturing. Anyways.
Well, they can also work with temporary stuff that matches the specs of who they're buying from. There's also
like that's like early prototype, but when you're doing prototypes that you're sending to developers.
Yes and no, because we're talking early development kits that are giant boxes that have nowhere near actual final hardware. They're just like, they're very big because they don't have the manufacturing down to the final pieces.
But
right?
that's not where they're at. Like they're sending like semi-completed headsets.
Well, I mean,
to people.
yeah, I don't know. No one has seen a picture of one. Like, is it actually in the shape and mold that they shipped it with? I doubt it.
No, I mean, like you're not at that. Well, at this point, they could be doing it. Like that's what you saw with like the PS5 dev kits. You had like the weird box thing, but by the time they were up at doing prototype manufacturing, they had basically things that were final hardware that we would be seeing as consumers.
Yeah.
Anyways, point is, Sony still hasn't announced a date. Although I don't think it's weird that they did, because I don't think they announced a date for PS5 until like this time last year. Anyways, or not last year, the year before.
A date? No, I didn't think we got a date until really late.
No, I mean like we were missing
like,
news from PS5, and I imagine
it was
the
like
same
September, October, and they were like, "It's coming in a month." Like,
yeah, I think what ends up happening is like what their production looks like in scale, and what they'll be able to allocate to given regions.
Yeah, I mean, there was also the pandemic complication, which was brand new for everybody at that point. So,
yeah,
this is 2020, right?
2020, yeah, it was the year of pandemic. Anyways, let's move on to the next topic. Activision making a move against unionization, maybe? You want to go into the details of this?
Yeah, so their Activision is turning 1,100, or is it offering? I think they're offering to make 1,100 part-time QA quality assurance developers full-time employees, including access to the company's benefits programs. Was there more to it than that, Justin, or did I sort of?
I mean, there's more background to that, right? Like the background being
yes.
I mean, the crux of the story is like this month they had opted to give 1,100 employees full-time position. That's on top of 500 employees that they did the same thing for.
Yeah.
And then they also provided that QA workers that were temporary would get a bump to $20 an hour minimum.
That's right. Yes, that was the piece I forgot.
But on top of that, they would then be offering benefits as well.
Yeah.
For people who are working full-time temporary, which is allowed in most states up to a certain period of time, and that they could enroll in the company's bonus programs. Usually the bonus programs are a percentage payout based off the performance of the game after it's gone to the market. And it's kind of like double-edged, because some people are going, hey, like, look at this win. Like, you unionize and you push the company, and suddenly you get some nice payouts from it. But there's a other side of this that relates to what happened, I think, late last year concerning Ravensoft. You want to talk about that, Eric?
I'm less familiar with that detail from before.
The Ravensoft details basically that late last year. This is after the harassment suits had come out.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it's because people had known that there were grumblings and people unhappy. And I guess it's the success of Call of Duty Warzone all prompted this motion to take 500 temporary QA workers and promote them to full-time QA staff. Uh, a lot of Ravensoft peoples were left out of that, and they're one of the major support teams for Call of Duty Warzone. So amongst the harassment lawsuit, this raise being given to certain people, Ravensoft's QA team went on a general strike in support of the people who were being harassed and saying, "Hey, our company's doing wrong," and because they were kind of miffed at where they were at. Uh, During the strike, there was a call to unionize. And this would have been like the first company within the game industry that is unionized, that outside of some other specific examples, but it's the first major studio having unionization. 78% of the QA workers were in favor of it, so it's a supermajority. So they couldn't have been denied. Result was Activision's like, hell no, that's not happening. If you want to unionize, we're going to have the larger Ravensoft company bid on whether or not they want unionization. So it would be the whole studio unionizing, not just the QA team. There's a couple things that happened afterwards, which Activision announced that they would be splitting up the QA team. Instead of being their own division, they would be broken up and they would be paired off with engineers to have a QA engineer work style, which, to be fair, is not that uncommon within the game industry. It's the timing suspicious. So, okay, we know that Ravensoft is now in a position where they are looking to unionize. There's a time period in which they have to try to get people to agree with the unionization effort. Activision is going to be working against them, trying to get people to not join unionization efforts. And while this is all happening, we get this announcement from Activision that's like, hey, 1,100 workers are now 1,100 temporary QA people are going to be getting full-time status and a $20 per hour benefit, pay benefits, etc. So that's the bigger story. Part of the wrench in this whole thing was that the none of those benefits could be provided to the QA workers at Ravensoft. So none of them got that bump to full-time status. None of them got the 20-hour base pay status. None of them got the benefits or anything else. Of which the I think it's called the telecommunication workers of California or something like that. The union that they're working with for the effort was like, this is garbage. Why can't they do that? Activision replied, well, we can't do that because the rules of unionization say we can't provide this during the period of time in which they're trying to get people to unionize. It's the laws that are in place, which then goes like, well, it's peculiar timing, isn't it? Right? Like, they decide to do this knowing full well that they can't offer this to any of the Ravensoft QA employees, either maybe as punishment or trying to dissuade people from the other QA teams in Activision to also unionize. So it's all just a bit dodgy, I'd say. Do you have any specific thoughts on this, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think your last statement there sort of summed it up. There's just something about it that feels disingenuous. There's, and it may be them actually trying to be genuine. Yeah, in their efforts to say like, okay, clearly we have workers that are not happy with the status quo. We've been underpaying. Like, let's what can we do to amend this where we don't have to, make the conversation between us and the employee more complicated by involving a third party. Like, that's possibly, to give them the benefit of the doubt, that's what they're looking at. Coming from up on high, it's more of a like, we don't want, of course, from a business standpoint, you don't want to give up your ability to effectively determine wages and like have to pay, what are the rates that you have to pay. It's more flexible if you can determine that as a company rather than have some other company determine what you have to pay and have to provide. given the state of sort of things in general right now, it's a really tough place to be in for both the worker and the company. And I think at where I am personally is sort of siding with the worker on a lot of this, in terms of just personal opinion. But I also don't know the business side. I don't know. We have, no one knows, what the heck Activision looks like on the at the upper tiers. At least no one who's going to come out and say anything in public.
Yeah.
And it's extra reason that they're not doing that is because they're currently in buyout talks with Microsoft. Right.
Yeah.
That it might even be an SEC violation of something if there were conversations or pieces of information that leaked during this period for that whole, and complicating that whole thing. So this could even be a way for them to try to like ameliorate some of the concerns on Microsoft's behalf about buying a company that currently has these ridiculously troublesome allegations, whether that be you're not paying your staff enough. What's the deal with that? Or, this is bad publicity for us. Like the bad publicity for you is rubbing off on us. We need you to do something about it. There's conversations inside that are really, they're easy to look at from the outside and say, I bet that's a thing, but it's hard to quantify from the outside what the impact is or who cares about what. And there are also aspects that we have no concept of.
And I'll say, to be fair, whether or not this is true, at least Microsoft's official statement on this is that they support the workers' rights to unionize, which is a pretty standard response. I think it's fair to say that most companies do not want unionization efforts to succeed. That's why you see Amazon and Starbucks and the like putting so much money towards ending unionization efforts. It usually forces the employer to pay more and makes it harder for them to let go of employees for reasons other than poor performance or something.
I just as sort of a kind of editorializing on the point that you just made a bit and extrapolating, I think it may speak to something a little bit more broadly problematic in kind of our system today, that companies are not paying their employees more to be competitive, but simply because the employees themselves are forcing their hand on it.
Yeah, I think that's the more telling part of it, right? Is that you're like, okay, now we'll provide benefits. You're like, okay, so you have people come in that are beyond temporary hires. They're temporary, and in places like California, you can have indefinite temporary hires that basically are full-time workers. They're getting paid hourly, but they're not provided benefits or anything else. And because they're considered an entertainment company, and usually this applies for things like filmmaking, where you might have a 3-month shooting timeline where you hire people temporarily. You don't want full-time staff to deal with production, on site for a month of shooting or something like that. So you hire temporary workers. They're going to work like 40 hours or 80 hours a week, getting these production shoots. And then once it's over, it's done and they get their paycheck and walk away. But the game industry has these long production windows.
Multi-year.
Yeah. And they're still getting away with having temporary workers for this period of time. And so you're looking at it now going like, okay, the workers are fed up with the treatment, and now they're offering, benefits. So people who've been working for a year now finally getting benefits for working basically like a full-time employer, but being considered or having a title of a temporary worker, being able to get bonuses and setting at $20 an hour, which I think is actually quite low. I think when I was working in QA, when I started in the industry in like 2006, my pay was like $17 an hour as like a junior QA person. So, like $20 an hour now being the base pay, like maybe that's because they have QA houses in like Oklahoma or something.
Right. But, location matters, and most of these big companies are located in not the cheapest places to live.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the case, right? So you're like going, okay, $20 an hour is your base rate now. That's, I'd almost say it's borderline insulting, but um, like it's good that they stepped up. I just think it's the wrong reasons that they're stopping up. It's not because they want to be good to their employees. It's because their employees are forcing their hand on being
Yeah.
better to the employee group. So
Right. Yeah, and to play the devil's advocate in this case, perhaps
right, Satan.
yeah, Satan. Perhaps there has been a realization at the company that oh wow, like yeah, we weren't aware of how badly we were, like we just that to us at the at management, not Ravensoft management, but like upper level Activision Blizzard, who determine budgets that make their way down into these lower companies, were like, oh, we did, it was just a line item for us, we didn't realize the impact and what this meant for it. Now that we're aware, like this could be something where they're like, oh crap, let's fix this. But I suspect that at that tier they're thinking more about the impact on their shareholders numbers. And
Yeah, I mean, usually it's maximizing
all of
profit
that.
more than anything else, for the people who
Yeah.
do set the budget. So
Yeah.
I mean, well, whatever. I could go into this, but it's
Yeah.
my hope this doesn't curb the appetite for unionization. I think it's actually a long time covering,
Yes.
not least of within the QA. It's
Yeah.
going to be even more pressing on engineering, as engineering is more and more available to be outsourced, and like the specialization within it becomes less and less important. So I think there's going to be like a long flowing trend for multiple years in in the production of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have another story about Activision.
They are all about being in the news cycle.
Yeah, you want to talk about this one, Eric? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, sure. So, as you may be aware, Activision Blizzard has been dealing with, is it more than one? I don't know. At least one harassment lawsuit.
There's more than one.
Yeah,
There's a federal level and a state level, and there's multiple allegations by individuals.
Right.
As well.
Yeah, that's right. In this case, the news of the day is, I think it came out last week, just about right before we went live with our last show. No, I'm sorry. That last piece was the one that was live right before our show. This was new, as in like a day or two ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So the state of California has been suing Activision Blizzard and building a case against them for this harassment. And this after several allegations have come forward, the state was like, okay, what's going on here? Let's dig into this. The frat boy mentality, all that other stuff. These all go into this case, and they've been doing research and trying to figure out what is happening. So California, the state of California versus Activision Blizzard is the lawsuit in question. Allegedly, the lead counsel for the state in the California's Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the DFEH, which is presumably the group that is the group of the government, the California state government, that is heading up the investigation and the lawsuit. The head, the top prosecutor in this case was Melanie Proctor. And she had stepped down. I'm sorry, not Melanie Proctor.
Yeah,
Janet Whipper.
Yeah.
I'm
Jeanette.
sorry.
Yeah.
Jeanette, you're right. Thank you. Melanie, we'll come into this in a moment. Jeanette Whipper, the chief counsel, had been fired earlier this year. I think it was like a couple months ago.
Yeah. Unclear why, to be fair.
Right. We don't know. Melanie Proctor, who was a top prosecutor and I believe an aide to Jeanette, Miss Whipper, stepped down yesterday or the day before, something like that. Early April, let's say, and as part of her resignation, she said, "Here's why I'm resigning. I'm resigning in protest," and it was because of allegedly the governor's office the governor of the state of California, Gavin Newsom,
Yeah.
repeatedly demanded advanced notice of litigation strategy and next steps of the litigation in this case.
Yeah, his allegedly his
Right.
his office was demanding that stuff.
Right. So there are many aspects to this that are um, difficult to piece together as to what actually was happening. Hopefully, there will be actual details that come out about this to give context going forward. Part of what we read this and it's like, okay, this is making headlines because it involves Activision Blizzard, because it sounds like somebody who works presumably works at the governor's office. It may not have been the governor directly, but someone there was reaching out and saying, we need information on this. Presumably that information was being, procured on behalf of the defense. Like, that's sort of what other situation would this matter, unless it was someone who had stock in Activision Blizzard and just wanted advance notice of when to sell, which is a huge violation of like so many laws, I think. But either way, that whole thing of if someone was stepping in and saying we need advance notice of what's going on and didn't provide a reason that was legally valid, that's a big red flag for some tomfoolery going on.
Yeah. I mean, what Proctor's saying is basically that Jeanette Whipper was a bulldog in this case. Like, she was successful at prosecuting companies who had violated any of the laws.
Mm-hmm.
And that Whipper, who was quietly fired, and there was not much known about that, Proctor is now alleging that she was fired because she was protecting the department's goals and not letting political influence the way that they were prosecuting. The governor's office did come in and say none of this is true, which you would expect them to say one way or another if it was or was not true. So those are the details of it. Proctor will be pursuing legal recourse under the Whistleblower Act. I think that the thing that's unfortunate about this is that you're the two top prosecutors in the case against Activision are now gone, which kind of decapitates your main defense or your main suit in defense against your main suit in the what you're going against Activision with. So the whole case seems kind of in limbo unless some great prosecutors step in and take up the work that was left behind by Proctor and Whipper.
Right. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Whether or not the alleged actions of the governor's office is true, I mean, it could go either way. You could see reasons for it happening, and you can also see it's for reasons not happening. I don't know. It's just unfortunate that a major sexual harassment suit against a company who's been very credibly claimed to have been doing so, it may not see the proper justice handed to it.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this, Eric?
No, I mean, I think my thoughts are I will watch with interest any news that or revelations that come out of this, and not least of which is the hope that a replacement counsel is announced for the position of chief prosecutor that makes sense and provides the case with something, some sort of chance to see actual justice done in the case that is what is determined.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Yeah.
Last bit of news for the day. For the week, I guess. Some interesting bit of news that came out I think this week, following some other bit of news that came out last week. The main thing here is that Sony and Lego's holding group, which isn't called Lego, but it's the people who own Lego, have both invested $1 billion each into Epic. The reasons for which are largely that they both have an interest in the metaverse. And just last week, Lego and Epic announced that they would be working together to create a future for a child-friendly metaverse that likely has some amount of
Lego blocks
Lego-fication in it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's unclear if Lego's going to be making it a Lego metaverse or if it's going to be something along the lines of using Lego's expertise in providing very well thought out children's toys to the metaverse and trying to apply the principles to how they go about creating toys to a place where Epic may be developing some sort of metaverse for them. I think the relevant points here is that Lego or Sony now owns a 5.4% share or stake in Epic, which is pretty big. I think they may be the single largest.
No, Tencent.
Tencent is this? Oh yeah, they're like a 30% stake, aren't they?
It's something. I think it might even be over 50.
Yeah, they had threatened to actually increase their holding to get Unreal to do something they wanted.
As of September 2021, Epic was owned. Tencent. Let's see what their Wikipedia page says. Tencent owns. So Tim Sweeney has over 50%. Tim Sweeney.
I know Tim Sweeney is one of the controlling.
Tencent has 40%.
40%, yeah. Fun.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyways.
Yeah. Anyways.
But a 5.4. So this Sony this follows a $250 million investment that they had given last year. I think it was around the time that they had shown off the UE5 demo on the PS5. I guess that wouldn't have been last year. That would have been 2020. But they followed up with a $1 billion investment. Also, what's interesting about this is that I think we talked about this briefly last week, actually, about Sony's kind of approach to using the Unreal Engine right now. And I think we were talking about how Sony has their own development engines that they use for God of War, for Uncharted, for Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank. But their smaller studios, they've been kind of been on a tear of purchasing smaller studios that are also producing some pretty great content.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this is that we now have 3 recently purchased Sony studios confirmed to be using UE5. So it looks to be that the Unreal Engine is a strategic play for them as well. For their small studios, it's a fast way to get those studios up and running on something without having to develop or put a lot of engineering effort towards creating a custom engine. And then instead of putting all their efforts into that, you have Sony coming in with their sort of like task groups that are good at narrative design and mocap work and cinematics and that sort of thing to go in and supplement these teams with like more spit and polish than they probably would be able to achieve on their own. So I think Firesprite was one. Haven's announced to be using UE5. And we also know that Housemarque used UE4 for Returnal. Thoughts on this, Eric? Thoughts on Metaverse or anything else that's of interest here?
Yeah, the Metaverse part is interesting. There's a lot of movement in that space right now, and it's hard to say. I mean, it's very early days, but people are starting to see that there is something to this future. I think the pandemic may have accelerated it by proving that people could live in a world where we talk like this with a camera and we can work in a space, and people seeing like, wow, if people VR and AR headsets improve mightily, in the next few years, it's not hard to say like, well, I would want to hang out with, uh, Justin in the virtual space, even though he's in Texas and I'm in California. We could be right next to each other in that space. Like, it's really not hard to see the attraction of this. And I think, given that games today, multiplayer games today, are sort of the proto metaverse, they are the space where people go on and, in massive multiplayer games, you go into a server with thousands of people and run around in that world together. That's the metaverse to an extent. That's a piece of a shard of the metaverse, let's say. Whether or not we'll ever get to a point where there's some unified like network where all of these 3D spaces can sort of communicate in some way, or the 3D world definition will exist on a server and your headset will just point to it and get everything that it needs instantly and just hop in. That's for future society to figure out, future tech companies to figure out. But I think that right there is what Sony and Lego are looking at Epic as one of the current major game engines, as the foundation for that type of
that's like furthest along in developing something. I think you could probably look at it and say there's like two major players right now. It's like Roblox and Epic, with Fortnite being like a proto metaverse.
To an extent, yeah.
And expanding from there and proving that you can do more things with the virtual space than just shoot each other and parachute from buses. I was winking at the VR space has come along sufficiently. You have Sony entering the space with a brand new VR headset that is a huge step above what their first foray into it is. They're clearly investing a lot of money into it. It's clearly an important business strategy of theirs. And I'd also say that it's clear that PlayStation Home may be making a comeback. Like, PlayStation Home was a metaverse to some degree back in the PS3 era. Yeah. That had, movie screening spaces and places where people could chat and talk about games. And you could also stage your group before going into a game. So they had like hubs to launch from a game or launch into a game from their PlayStation Home area, which is exactly what you'd expect from a metaverse and what's been proposed as a metaverse. Right. And they're talking about reviving that. So it's no wonder that Sony is really interested in what the metaverse space is, and having a 5.4% share in a company like Epic that's probably furthest along getting us somewhere to a metaverse, at least one that is not aimed specifically at children. That could very well explain their renewed investment in Epic as a company.
Yep.
Any other feelings on this?
No, I mean, I think it's good. Actually, yes, there's one thing. And that is that I'm personally a fan of seeing these major companies, Lego and Kirkby. They're KIRKBI, the holding. I think that's it. Yeah, they're the holdings company for Lego. But these two companies putting those billions, $1 billion each, into Epic, who has stated we are not on board with the NFT stuff. We are not participating in crypto. That this is more of the pure technology. Crypto is not at all necessary for any of this BS. The metaverse and the concept of interconnected games or virtual space does not rely on crypto at all, and it seems as though crypto and the Web3 conversation, in many people's minds, like the metaverse concept is being combined with those because there is such a push from that space to involve it. But to me, as a consumer who's interested in that space, but sees all of the crypto right now as basically a giant bubble of a Ponzi scheme, almost all of the crypto stuff, it is reassuring to me that there are big corporations who are interested in pushing the technology and making this possible without any of that. and that the money that they're spending is in Epic's side of this equation rather than Ethereum's, let's say.
Right. Well, yes.
Ethereum is
I would say this because like I think the current conversation around crypto tends to be the way that's being exploited, but there still is like in the pure technology sense of things, like the ledgerless secure transactions, which is the foundation to a lot of these things.
yeah.
There is utility around the use of these things for virtual items and virtual goods. But
There really isn't. There really isn't. Like it's no better. It's no better than having some 2 or 3 parties create an open source like database on the web and say we're all going to pay for it. We have Let's Encrypt.
yeah, no, of course, right? Like it's like you could get agreement from parties to create something that's very similar to the exact same thing, but not as open to, I guess, open markets or being publicly traded or whatever the hell it is. But it's like a functional, well-supported network that does that sort of thing. It's like there's still pure utility behind some of these things.
There's very little. There's only a handful of use cases that are actual use cases where it actually makes sense to do things in a distributed ledger that is public or private, and distributed. It could be just distributed amongst a bunch of banks, right? We all have to agree on which money was transferred to whom. So we will set up, as the big banks, we will set up our own, groups of these things that all come to some agreement upon which transactions happened in what order when. That makes sense. Bitcoin, to an extent, makes sense. I will say that like the mining and the way that is set up where it has diminishing returns and it becomes effectively a set size of a commodity. Yes, that sort of makes sense in its own space. Building this whole future on smart contracts where I have my own can of soda and this is like my specific can and I can sell it virtually to you makes 0 sense because we already have that. We have that implemented a bajillion ways online. The fact that you would put a smart contract, which at least in today's implementations is these tiny little bits of code that do not suffice to even contain, there's not enough information in there to contain the actual model detail for this. It's a pointer to somewhere else that says, here is the thing. And if I just change the way that thing is, it's gone. So then also all companies have to agree on the model format for this, this is something that they're going to implement on their end is the support for this format, whatever it is. None of that makes sense. None of it makes sense, at least in today's world. And like the way that the NFT space is implemented, and everybody is looking for a problem for this solution,
Yes.
which is the main problem. There are a handful.
Well, it's not just
specific.
like looking for a problem for the solution. They're also going like, I can get rich by just claiming
Right.
a technology, supportive technology, opening up a coin to fund it, and that coin just wildly blowing up on speculation without actually having any substantive technology or even purpose. It's just claims.
Yeah.
It's like Dogecoin, right? Like it's like, what does it actually do? It's like, I don't know, but it was just speculated on, so that's why it's worth the value it is.
Right. Well, then you get someone like Elon Musk coming in and saying Dogecoin is the new hotness. I'm invested,
Yeah.
and then everybody piles on. The value goes up, and Elon Musk goes, "Cool, profit."
Yeah. No, exactly.
And then leaves. Like, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So getting back on topic, I'm very happy that these players are investing in the potential future of a metaverse that is devoid so far of all that stuff that we just sort of riffed on a bit. That we're now in talking about sort of like the pure experiences and the technological capabilities that are gonna kind of build the foundation for our future entertainment and in some sense possibly or probably our future communications in general.
I just hope everything's done through V-Bucks.
Yes, please.
And then we can speculate on the value of a V-Buck and see that have an actual market currency that fluctuates on V-Bucks.
I don't want it. I'd want to still want to be able to go to like Walmart and pick up V-Bucks at 20% off and get my 20% off on everything. Space.
Let's just hope that future doesn't come.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this week. We'll be back next week on Thursday to talk more about whatever gaming news is going to come out, because inevitably something does. Hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe this on YouTube, on Twitch. You can just watch it, I guess. I don't know. You can follow us on Twitch as well. Either way, you'll get updates about when we go live. So hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a good rest of the week.
Enjoy your weekend.
Yeah, do that. Enjoy your weekend. Take care, everybody.